Recently I paid a visit to the Royal Navy War Memorial in Portsmouth, here in England, and I confess I had a bit of a moment as I gazed teary-eyed at the thousands of names listed. There were ranks all the way from able seaman to admiral, as listed as having lost their lives at sea in the service of their country. Below the plaques stand individual memorial stones placed by friends and family. One of these stones struck me as outstanding because of what was written on it. On it were listed 2 ships and 2 sailors' names, and it got me thinking. I'll show you the stone at the end of the video, and you'll see why. At the outbreak of World War II, the dominant power at sea was the battleship. During the war, the ships would become truly enormous. When HMS Dreadnought was launched back in 1906, she weighed in around 18,000 tons. The largest battleship of World War II, the Yamato, clocked in at around 72,000 tons. These vast ships could hurl tons of high explosive and metal with each broadside and rain death, destruction and devastation on anything within range. They were built to take a beating as well. The battleship Tirpitz was built with around about 22 different compartments in the lower part of her hull. Each one could be closed off so that if one part was breached by a torpedo or a mine, it wouldn't sink the whole ship. One ship, the USS New York, survived both World Wars and then 2 nuclear explosions as a target ship after the war. She eventually sank in 1948 after being used for target practice. These things were built to last. Each ship was so large, so powerful and so expensive that they rarely fought each other in direct battle. Britain lost 5 dreadnoughts in World War II, and only one of them to direct fire from an enemy dreadnought. When dreadnoughts did fight, though, the actions became legend. HMS Warspite set a record for naval gunnery when she hit the Italian battleship the Giulio Cesare at a range of around about 15 miles. When HMS Rodney attacked the crippled Bismarck, it became the only time in history that a battleship torpedoed another battleship. But battles like these tend to become a bit romanticised and mythical. It's difficult to think that inside each of these huge vessels there's over 1,000 men living and fighting. When one of these ships is lost at sea, most of the crew are killed, either by explosion, drowning, or exposure to the elements, or shark attack in one famous American example. When battleships explode and sink, it can lead to the deaths of hundreds or even thousands of men in the space of minutes or even just a few seconds. It's a terrible waste of life, the scale of which is no longer with us. To put it into perspective, we were fighting in Afghanistan for longer than both world wars put together, but Britain lost 456 service personnel in that time. When HMS Royal Oak, a veteran of Jutland, sank in 1939, over 800 of her crew were killed in a matter of minutes. Among the dead was another veteran of Jutland, Rear Admiral Henry Bladgrove. Over 100 of those killed were boy sailors less than 18 years old. Across the 5 dreadnoughts lost in World War II, almost 4,000 men died. That many men killed in such a short space of time, 2 years, 39 to 41. It's quite difficult to fathom, but maybe if we looked at a personal story, it might bring home just some of the horror of World War II, both for the men serving and their families back home. One famous case of a family at sea is in 1942, the 5 Sullivan brothers were all killed when the ship they were serving on, the USS Juno, was torpedoed and sunk by a Japanese submarine. This taught navies all around the world not to put all their eggs in one basket. But as the following story will show, splitting your eggs between different baskets doesn't guarantee their safety either. The Juno was a relatively small cruiser at around 7,000 tons and not built for heavy fighting. The smallest British battleship lost in World War II was 4 times that, and to serve on these capital ships was a great honour. Their size and power made the crews feel safe. The families back home would have worried about their fathers and sons being on active service, but at least on the mightiest battleships afloat, they stood a good chance of surviving. Or so you'd think. HMS Hood was a battle cruiser, and until recently she'd been the largest, or certainly the longest, ship ever to serve in the Royal Navy. beaten only by the two new aircraft carriers, the HMS Queen Elizabeth and HMS Prince of Wales. Hood was known as the Mighty Hood and was the pride of the Royal Navy. In 1941, a shockwave rippled through the British people and the Admiralty. The Mighty Hood clashed with the pride of the German Navy, the Bismarck, and was sunk in less than 15 minutes of battle. Hood exploded and sank, and of her 1,400 crew, only 3 survived. On board was a Royal Marine corporal by the name of Thomas Cuthbert. I feel a strange connection with Cuthbert because he and I were both born in a town called Shoreham-by-Sea on the south coast of England. Born in 1916, he was just 24 when he was killed on board Hood. His parents, Albert and Nellie, and his wife Edith, must have been devastated when they heard the news. His brother John would have been upset as well, but may not have had as much time to dwell on it. John himself was also on active service in the Marines. In November of 1941, just 6 months after the sinking of the Hood, HMS Barham was torpedoed by a German U-boat. She listed to port and the order was given to abandon ship. 4 minutes after being hit, Barham was lying on her side in the water when a sudden explosion ripped through the ship. It was famously caught on camera. This is the point where around 860 men lost their lives in a single second. Among them was 30-year-old Royal Marine John Cuthbert. John left behind a wife called Ivy. This is the one memorial among the thousands of names that set me thinking and digging. In all this destruction, here's a family for whom the sea would have been a major part of their lives, and now for 2 of them, it was a major part of their deaths as well. Millions of men and women died in World War II, on both sides. It's difficult to get your head round, but perhaps the only way is to look at individual stories. To any descendants of the Cuthbert family, I am truly sorry for the loss of Thomas and John. I thank you for their service, along with the families of thousands of Royal Navy personnel whose names are listed on the vast monument in Portsmouth. Next time you see an interview on TV with someone talking about how they lost a son in one of the world wars, spare a thought for the Cuthbert family, because they went through it twice in 6 months.